welcome back for another episode of Sorry for Rambling. As always, I'm your host, Alex Kack, and I am joined today by Solomon Rajput, candidate for Congress, U.S. Congress, as a Democrat in Michigan's 12th District. Solomon, thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Yeah, really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure's all on this end. So let's start off with some of the basics. You are fairly young. How old are you?
I just turned 28 2 weeks ago, 28 years young.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And you are doing this barnstorming congressional run. What possibly inspired you to do that?
Yeah, I know. And on top of it all, I'm a medical student and I'm taking a leave of absence to run. It's when I tell people that I'm a medical student and I'm running for Congress, everyone gets so confused. They're like, a medical student? How is a medical student running for Congress? Is that even allowed? Like, I don't get it. No, how does that happen? And I totally understand. It's very, very unusual, but I think I've got a halfway decent answer to how this whole thing came about. So when I was younger, I was really passionate about politics because I was taking a look at our messed up status quo and I was thinking, you know what? It'd be really cool to do something about these big issues. Maybe I'll get involved in politics or government to try to solve some of these problems. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, oh, wait, actually, you can't count on the government to get anything done. Like, they will literally never do anything because they're just bought and sold by big businesses. And I was like, well, there's no way in heck I'm going to sign up to be a shield to corporations. Like, that's not me. I'm sorry. I can't. I'm out. So I guess I'm going to have to do something else. And ultimately, I ended up in medical school because it's a way to help people when they're going through a really tough time. And I was thinking maybe we can change our healthcare system from the inside out. But now times are changing, which is really exciting. And we've got a whole new generation of leaders who are saying we're not going to be beholden to corporate interests any longer. We're going to go out there and fight unapologetically for what people in this country need for us to get done. It's people like Bernie Sanders, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar. And that really inspired me to run because I was thinking maybe if we get the right people in office, we actually can do something about these big issues for once. And so ultimately, after thinking about it, I decided to run because the establishment has totally failed us. All they know how to do is to think small. But it's that same small thing that's gotten us into this mess in the first place. I think by now it's clear to everyone that we can't just keep putting band-aids on our broken systems and expecting things to change. We need to go out there and fight for the big, bold policies that are going to address our issues at a fundamental structural level. So we've begged and pleaded with our politicians for a long time to go out there and fight for these big changes, but they've ignored us time and time again. And after a while, we have to realize that we can only beg for so long before it's clear that these people, they're never going to go out there and fight for what we need to get done. They're never going to change. So if we want to get this stuff done, we got to go do it ourselves because at this point, we're done waiting. So that's what I decided.
What are some of those things that you'd like to fight for? What are some of these big systemic changes that you're advocating in this campaign?
Yeah. So we've got 5 big ones. 5. So number one, for me, it's our top priority is the Green New Deal and tackling climate change in the short amount of time we have left. And then the other ones in no particular order are we need to create a Medicare for All system that would guarantee healthcare to all people in this country. We need to make college free, eliminate student debt. We need to get big money out of our political system. And we also need to ensure that we have racial justice in this country and that we support the Black Lives Matter movement.
I heard you mention, Medicare for All. I assume being a medical student, that's probably something that you have kind of some strong opinions about. Through your studies, what is something that really stood out to you about why this system is so broken?
Yeah, for sure. So as a medical student, right, I'm like a mini doctor. Like we go with doctors, we see patients, we try to figure out what's going on with them. And so often we have to tell people, we know exactly what's going on with you and we've got the perfect thing for you, but we can't give it to you because your health insurance doesn't cover it. And it's some pretty heartbreaking stuff. I mean, one story in particular, like really stands out. It's a story of a sophomore in a local university in our district. And she was telling me about her mom. And her mom's experience with the healthcare system. And her mom was getting pretty sick, but they didn't have health insurance. So her mom said, well, there's no way in hell I'm going to see a doctor because we can't afford that. So I'm going to try to tough this one out. So she tried toughing it out, but she kept getting sicker and sicker. And ultimately she got so sick that they had no other option. They had to go see the doctor. Turns out that she'd waited too long and this disease that could have totally been treated ended up actually killing her. And to top it off, the family had to pay the medical bills for years afterwards because they were in so much medical debt. So for me, what I kind of took from that, what I've taken from the experiences that I've seen happen in the hospital setting firsthand, it's that, our broken healthcare system is killing people. If that lady had gotten sick in any other developed country, there's a really good chance she'd still be alive today. Because what has every other developed country been able to figure out? They've been able to figure out how to make healthcare a human right, which is just a fancy way of saying if you're sick, you should be able to see a doctor. If you're sick, you should be able to get your medicine. That's all it's saying. So when we're asking for progressive policies like Medicare for all, nothing we're asking for is radical. We're just trying to play catch up with the rest of the world. I mean, everywhere else has done this. Like in Canada, they've done this, right? Canada is 30 minutes away from me. It's not like some crazy radical country. It's like one of the chillest, nicest countries that exist. I mean, their reputation is for being too nice. Like most radical thing about them, they have milk in bags, right? That's it. So nothing we're asking for is radical. I mean, what's really radical is insist that we can't do this, that we're too uniquely incompetent or incapable or dysfunctional or backwards to get this done. I mean, what's radical here is the status quo and it's barbaric.
You know, the healthcare debate has shifted so much from 2008 till now.
Oh yeah.
And to me, it holds a very special and important place, I think, for me as a voter and as someone who works within politics and comments on it. You know, I grew up without health insurance. I've seen this firsthand. I'm lucky, honestly, at the end of the day, that the problems that I let exacerbate were only as bad as they were, and not like I'm not some horrible statistic like you were just talking about. And that's true of a lot of people that I know, probably a lot of people that you know. But the reality is, no one, even people who are in the middle class or who are wealthy, they're still not happy with their health insurance options. You know, that's my experience. There is no person outside of I feel like the political system or the healthcare industry itself who is sitting there talking about, man, I love Blue Cross Blue Shield. Holy shit, that's the best stuff ever. Let me buy more of that. Why are we facing this roadblock? Why are we still discussing this? You know, we've been talking about a single payer system in this country for over 100 years. Why are we still fighting for it?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly a baffling question because there's literally only one answer, and the answer is because of the influence of corporate money in our political system. And that's precisely why we need to make sure that we elect leaders who are rejecting corporate money and who will be fighting for the public financing of elections. So, I mean, what we know is that corporations give politicians money not because they're trying to be nice, because they expect something in return, and our politicians are more than happy to write the rules in their favor. So what is that but legal bribery? And we need to call it for what it is. Because our country works beautifully, fantastically, brilliantly well if you're a corporation, if you're Blue Cross Blue Shield, if you're a private health insurance company. But if you're a person who gets sick, if you're a person with needs that could be addressed by a social safety net, you're getting the short end of the stick. And I think it's just remarkable that every election, healthcare is the number one issue in our country. Because at some point, if we properly address this problem, healthcare should not be the number one issue, because people will be satisfied and having their needs met. You know, in other countries, healthcare is not the number one issue. It's like crazy to think, because it seems like healthcare always has to be our number one issue. But like in other countries, they don't have this problem. You know, I talked to someone in Canada. I'm like, what are your biggest issues? And this person in Canada was like, you know, the cost of internet is really high here. And I'm like, oh, really? How high is it? And they're like, and then it ends up being as high as we pay in America. And I was like, oh my God, that's crazy. That like internet is one of your top concerns. And then I was talking to somebody else from Vietnam. So she studies here, but she's from Vietnam and she moved here recently. And her number one issue is medical debt. And I'm like, why is your number one issue medical debt? And she's like, well, we didn't experience this in Vietnam. Like, if you want to go see a doctor, you would just go, and like, you never have to worry about like how you're gonna pay for it, or if like you would be in debt from it. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like, not only are we the last developed country, but we are behind many developing countries. Like, we are kind of like a developing country in how we act, you know, not because we don't have the money, but because we just choose not to spend it on improving the lives of our own people. We just spend it on dumb shit.
I mean, that could be a campaign ad for you right there. That last 30 seconds. We should cut that out and use it, because that's the diagnosis of all of the problems. And I feel, to me, it seems that the healthcare question, like you said, is the first thing we talk about. it's not just that it prevents us from addressing these other issues. It's connected to almost all of them, whether it's, public safety and crime, whether it's, small business stability, economic mobility. All of these things are tied directly into that healthcare question.
Oh yeah, for sure. We could not have designed a worse system. We could not have designed like a more dystopic, dysfunctional system than like our current healthcare system. I mean, it's just like, it's wild, right? I mean, like, and it's something that people are really, really recognizing is like fatally flawed in the middle of our coronavirus pandemic, right? Because like, there was a contingency of people that were saying, you know what, like my healthcare's fine. I got a good healthcare from from my employer. Like I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose that. Like I worked hard for that, right? Out of a job because of coronavirus. And now not only do you not have an income, but you also are in the middle, like you're abandoned in the middle of a global pandemic, hoping that you don't get sick, because if you do, you don't have health insurance. And how are you possibly going to pay for your medical expenses in the ICU, which is like not a cheap place. So yeah, I think, I mean, it like, and like you said, small business stability. The thing is like, for the people that are getting their healthcare from their employer, the employer, it's not like the employer is getting it for free. They have to pay for it. And that's money that could have been given to you in wages. And so, and also for small business, for entrepreneurs, right? Like the idea of starting a business and not only getting enough money to be able to like pay workers, but also finding that money to be able to pay for benefits, pay for healthcare. It's like very onerous. It's like a huge impediment towards entrepreneurship and the viability of small businesses in this country. So yeah, I mean, it's just a remarkably flawed system.
And it's shocking that it took so long to get so many people, I think, running for office and having it be a central kind of policy plank. I want to move forward to the state of your race. Let's talk a little bit about what the dynamics at play are there and how you're being received and your message is being received. What's been your experience campaigning so far?
It's been awesome. It's been awesome. So, we're going up against an 87-year-old dynasty. It's the longest American political dynasty in history that we at least know of. We're going up against a corporate centrist. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell doesn't support the Green New Deal. She doesn't support making college free or eliminating student debt. She's taken almost $2 million in money from corporate PAC donations. So the thing about our district is that it's a very progressive district. The Democrats take about 70% of the vote here in the election against the Republican. In 2016, Bernie Sanders won this district by 10%. In the governor's race, the candidates who were running as progressives won the majority of the votes in this district. So this is a district with that really cares deeply about progressive values, and that is not being represented, is not having those values represented in the United States Congress. So many people are very excited about the policies that we're trying to champion, about the fact that we can get some new ideas and no longer be represented by a family that's held the seat for 87 years straight.
And you say dynasty, you're inferring, just to be clear here to anyone listening, a family. This is traditionally what we would consider a political dynasty. We're not talking about a central kind of establishment, right. Or a continuing legacy of similar views. We're talking about a single family holding that seat.
One family. So Congresswoman Debbie Dingell is the current holder of the seat. And then prior to that, her husband held the seat for 60 years and was the longest longest serving congressperson in history in America. And then prior to that, his father held the seat. So like truly a like a family business.
And yet at the same time, one has to imagine that to hold something for so long, there's got to be some good feeling or goodwill within the community. Are you experiencing a backlash for challenging that?
No, because, we are not making this at all about people, about like personality, right? It's about character at all, because it's not. Congresswoman Dingell is a perfectly nice person. We just differ on policy. We just differ on what we believe we need to be fighting for in this country. And so, no, really, it's just been a very civil, nice race that's really been focused on policy differences. People have been very receptive to our message. The fact that a family has held that seat for so long, there definitely are some things that we really appreciate that family for doing. But also, when a family holds a seat for so long, when they have so much power over such a long period of time, it really like scares people from like wanting to challenge them. So that is there's like, they're very heavily centered on the establishment, or they have like a very heavy influence on the establishment, and many people are just very intimidated at the idea of challenging them. So there's actually been very few challenges. Congresswoman Dingell, after she aside from the first time that she ran, when John Dingell had retired, like she's never been challenged, right? And then her husband, when he was in office, rarely was challenged. So like there's really just not been many challenges.
I want to talk about the kind of the tone of your race as you described it, because you are part of this wave of progressive challengers that's we're seeing all over the country running in congressional districts against incumbent Democrats. There are views and perceptions of some of these challengers that they are running. Yes, there's talking about huge policy differences, but ultimately the campaigns themselves, they sometimes get very ugly. We're talking about a lot of mudslinging, a lot of kind of general broad swath kind of character hits that are being done online and elsewhere. And you're not doing that. That's not what you're attempting to point out. What do you make of that perception, though? And do you feel tied to it? I mean, in this national conversation, do you feel like you're tied to something that really you have nothing to do with when it comes to kind of ugly personality politics?
I think that every race is different. Everyone wants to run the race however they want to run it. And I can't speak to how other people run their race. I'll just say that for us, we're really just, the reason I'm running is there's no like animosity between that I feel, at least, against our current congresswoman. I just think that like we need somebody who's going to be championing these progressive policies. We need somebody who's going to be really focused on a Green New Deal, on making college free. I mean, our district has 6 colleges and universities. It has many recent graduates, young professionals. On average, it's a pretty young average age for a district. And I believe that corporate money has no place in our political system. So those are big differences between us and Congresswoman Dingell. And also, I believe that we should be defunding and demilitarizing the police and allocating a portion of the police budget towards community services. So those are big differences between us, and we're really just focused on that. I don't think that people, it's funny because maybe if we were in a district where there was a serious Republican, a chance for a Republican to seriously take the seat, maybe there would be like more pushback, like, well, why are you doing this? You're giving like ammunition to the Republicans. But I don't believe we would be, because it's really just policy differences. And the Democrat wins 70% of the vote in this district. So it's really just an opportunity for people to vote however they feel without having to do this game theory thing of, well, I'd like to vote for this person and I believe more in what they have to say, but at the same time, like we need to think about like, who's going to cater to the moderates in the general election to win over the Republicans. We don't have any kind of like weird calculation like that. Yeah,
this electability shuffle that Democrats are so preoccupied with for the last 30 years,
Right, exactly. And also like that framework and of thinking is like so fundamentally flawed, because it's just like how many swing Trump supporters does anybody know? Like 3, that they've ever heard of in their life, right? Like most people are either Democrat or Republican, solidly in their views, and are either going to come out and vote or stay home, right? And so like let's energize our base to come out. And that is a more electable person. The person who's most electable is the one that can energize their base to actually come out and vote, and not like just try to pander to this non-existent middle independent swing voter that like really just barely exists.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think always drives me nuts, just like working with the numbers on these things. There's a sizable portion of this country that does flip back and forth in presidential elections, but they're not that sizable. They're like somewhere around 12, 13%, and they're spread out across the nation. And also their views they're not dead in the center.
Right.
They range from the far, far right to the far left and kind of all over the place and often varying by issue. Like the reality is someone who's flipping back and forth that dramatically, on a single ballot, much less per election cycle, the chances of appealing to them on a broad basis are slim. They're so slim. And that's these kind of game theory calculations that people do never made any sense to me, because ultimately you're going to hit a handful of them on one point and lose a bunch of them on another, no matter who you are. So why are we focusing on this idea that we could win them over by just not taking a stand on anything?
It's literally so crazy dumb. And like, also what we do know is that about half of the Democratic Party is progressive, right? And so it's just like, let's ignore this entire huge swath that is half this party, and then let's try to cater to this random small group of people that may be Republican one day, maybe Democrat another day. But like, those people's votes for some reason are much more important than the people who are very actively trying to become a big part of this party in order to like change our country. So it just, not only does it not make numerical sense, but it also is, just feels like it really devalues the importance of the large swath of this country that believes in progressive policies.
And so much of it's tied to President Clinton in '92, but I feel like people took all of the wrong lessons from that race. And I actually think a lot of the progressive challengers like yourself, the younger progressive challengers, actually maybe, whether you did so or not, have learned more of the right lesson from that, which is offer something different. Bill Clinton, ran to the center and won, but that was also brand new at that time. Democrats were not in this kind of centrist mindset. That was what every headline about him said, was he was this young guy offering something completely different.
Right.
That was the appeal of him.
Yeah. He
also, they had a sizable center-right third-party challenger in that cycle, which probably didn't hurt Bill Clinton. Yeah, that probably didn't hurt Bill Clinton in a general election sense, right? But the asinine thing is like that approach isn't fresh and new anymore. That was 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
To me, someone like you, frankly, is a better, not ideologically, obviously, but from an electoral sense. And if you want to talk about the game theory, someone like you, to me, is a much, much better continuation of that legacy than someone who was first elected, at the turn of the 21st century and is still parroting the same thing.
Right. No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. Yeah. And you know what is, the thing is, like, we did have a young up and coming politician who ran to the center in this past election, and it didn't really quite work out for him, Mr. Mayor Buttigieg. So yeah, and I think also, I couldn't agree more. And also just like something that I have been shocked by now that I've been in this world of politics, like as a candidate for 10 months, which is wild, is just how shallow the level of analysis is. Like, people will just take, just in general, like in politics, right? Like, people will just take like a soundbite or like a narrative and then build a strategy around it without like actually thinking about how that like relates to a strategic purpose and an objective. So one example of this, which is wild, is that I was talking to somebody who is running for a more local seat, like for state Senate. And he was telling me that they're going to raise tons of money. They've got like hundreds of thousands of dollars that they're going to be coming in. Like, all he's focused on is raising all this money. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. So like, good for you. That's great. What are you going to spend it on? And he's like, I don't know. What do you think I should spend on? Elections are expensive, so we're focused on raising this money, but like, I'm not really quite sure. I'm like that's like literally people's campaign strategy is like, they've heard elections are expensive, so let's raise money. And they're like, okay, I guess we're going to raise money. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, like, sure, there are costs, but what are they? Like, what are we spending money on? Let's figure that out. Let's figure out if those things we're spending money on are effective. Let's look. So our campaign is very evidence-based. Like, everything that we've done, we've looked into the scientific literature to see what is the impact of sending mailers on vote outcomes, on like vote share, right? Like, what is the impact of like making phone calls, knocking on doors? Are robocalls effective? You know, like all of these things. We've looked at the literature to see like what is effective, and then we built a strategy around the effective tactics. And then we've decided like, oh, these are effective tactics. Some of these require some money, so let's raise that money in order to be able to pay for those tactics. So it's just like, but like, what? It's wild. Like, why is that? I really feel like our campaign is the only campaigns that does that. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, literally zero sense.
Well, so much of it is on like the people like me, the consultants, who, right. And the thing that blows me away is how because the information is out there, and you gather.
Fine.
Yeah, you can find it. Also, if you've done this for a while, you build anecdotal experience. You learn, which type of messages resonate with people in which areas. And, at least you should be keeping a log of this stuff. You should be keeping your own past work to see but that's not what happens. You get the same people coming in, selling the exact same idea to 5 campaigns in a row. They'll sell the same mail piece to 5 different people, and all they do is just basically change the color, the name, and the photo on it. That's it. And it blows me away. I mean, yard signs is the one that I always get in arguments with about. The little stick them in the ground. The supporters love them, but they're expensive. To get them made ethically and by a union shop, that's pricey. And there is no tangible evidence that they convert votes at all.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a really interesting situation. Like, there's so many different opportunities for someone who sounds really convincing to sell you on an idea, but it's really just based off of their like conjecture or their like just their like vibe. And I'm like, and so in our campaign, we always ask, what's the evidence for that? And like, if somebody doesn't have like compelling evidence, then we're like not going to do it, and like, unless there's just not very good evidence for or against, and then we're going to have to go like more, then we have to like think about more like anecdotal or more like, elicit feedback in like a less scientific way. So yeah, I think that is something that has been, I think that is definitely something that I'm always been shocked by in the world of politics.
We're getting to the end of the program here, and I'm going to pivot because I like to end all of these by asking everyone who comes on the same question.
Sure.
Which is, throughout your life and your campaign, this new career you've embarked on, what's the thing that you most want to get put out there into the world? What do you really want to convey to other people?
I really want to convey a sense of urgency. Our campaign's message, our slogan, the whole, like, what got me into this race is this idea that we're done waiting. And I think that everyone should be done waiting. So I'm a medical student. I'm taking a leave of absence to run because I think the issues in our country are way too urgent, and we're done waiting on politicians to do something about it. In particular, the idea of climate change is something that terrifies me. I feel like we are all kind of going about our lives as if we're just like playing house almost. Like, we're just focused on what we're doing, like our school, our career, but we're ignoring the fact that like the house is burning around us. And like, that is why we need to do something right now. And that is why we need to be focused on, trying to figure out how we can urgently address these issues, So I think in particular, for me as a medical student, I was thinking a lot about how I've got a couple more years of medical school left, and I have a couple of years after that before I become a full-fledged actor. So by the time I become a full-fledged actor, it'll be 5 or 6 years from today. But what kind of world will I be entering into as a doctor? Ultimately, somebody who wants to have a family if we don't do anything about this issue, and if we reach a point of no return on climate change, right? So I think that for everyone out there, my message for them is that I'm done waiting. I hope you're done waiting, because like I think that we should all be done waiting at this point.
Solomon Rajput, candidate for Congress in Michigan's 12th district. Solomon, thank you so much for coming on the show. Stay safe and good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you so much. It was great being here. Thanks so much.